here again. This one happens in the conference has no budget. They got the speakers. So I want to happen. Anyway, my talk today is called, please settle down, we're running out of time. So, Cool Aid or Coke Light challenges the Catholic leadership. And my subtitle is Semi-Scattered Thoughts for Reflection and Conversations, because my ideas are still percolating. So I thought I'd test them out with you. As always, you know the drill. I'm not just going to give you a lecture. There'll be pauses, there'll be time for you to reflect, provocations for you to think, springboard for your conversations. And so I'll be offering you reflection and conversation pieces. So if you plan to fall asleep during the session, don't have a seatmate, because you're going to have to do some work together. So maybe you're wondering with the title, what's with all the beverage metaphors? Why Cool Aid and why Coke Light? So I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about them. In English we have a saying, drinking the Kool-Aid. And basically, if you don't know what it means, it is defined this way. When you say somebody has drunk the Kool-Aid, someone has accepted a deadly, deranged, or foolish ideology based upon the coaxing of another. This is actually based on a true story, a true tragic story. On November 18 of 1978 in Jonestown, Guyana, Jim Jones, a cult leader of the People Temple movement, convinced his followers to ingest a powdered cyanide-laced drink made from flavor aid, not Kool-Aid. It's been mistaken for Kool-Aid, leading to the tragic death of 900 people. So when you say somebody has drunk the Kool-Aid, it's not a compliment. You're saying that the guy got brainwashed, the guy was indoctrinated. What about Coke Light? Maybe you haven't heard me say this, I just made it up. No? Having your Coke and drinking it too. No? It sounds like having your cake and eating it too. But basically for me, Coke Light is a metaphor for enjoying things without the undesirable consequences. We want to enjoy Coke without the sugar. So enjoy things without the undesirable consequences. For me, it's a metaphor for an a la carte approach in life, where you want to pick and choose and order what you want, and you want to be very selective. So basically, it's a live and let live attitude. Let people choose whatever they want. Let them have their cake and eat it too. Let them have their Coke and drink it too. So these two beverage metaphors for me symbolize two styles in leadership. The first one I would call lordship. I think we know the type. People sort of just order people around. They expect people to follow everything they say, just like the cult leader in Jonestown. So it's kind of lordship. You just want to order people around. You expect people to follow whatever you want, whatever your instructions are. The Coke Light for me is a metaphor for the opposite extreme of that leadership style, and I call it laid-backship. I'm a very laid-back leader. I'm just going to let you do whatever you want. I'm probably going to be a very popular leader because people can go about, they're left to their own devices. So these are the two extreme opposites of leadership styles. So what is your assessment of the predominant leadership style in the Catholic Church today? Okay? Not the ideal, but the actual, based on your experience. So I want you to think about your bishops, your superiors, your parish priests, and your principals, and what would you say the majority of them subscribe to? Do they subscribe to the Kool-Aid lordship style of leadership, or the Coke Light laid-backship style of leadership? You know the drill, you have to choose a number. Give you a couple of minutes, talk to your secrets. Okay, you have 1 minute to make a choice. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, have you clicked your number? I'm going to ask you to be honest and to be courageous. I want you to stand up if I call for your number, okay? If I call for a number, please stand up and everyone please look around. We want to read the room, okay? So those who chose 1 or 2, please stand up. 1 or 2. 1 or 2, okay? So you have to help me decide which is the majority. 1 or 2, okay? Okay. Thank you. Let's give a big hand for being courageous. How many people chose 3 and 4? 3 or 4? 3 or 4. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I can't tell. I don't think there's a clear majority. But it tells us both leadership styles obviously are not ideal, right? There's always something lacking. It's good to have an assertive leader, but if that leader gets carried away, that's not going to be a synodal church. It's also okay to be respectful of what people want, to hear people's voice, but if you're too laid back, there's going to be chaos in your organization. Okay? So what kind of leadership do we need? As we know, because of Pope Francis' call to synodality, it's a different kind of leadership that's called for. It's neither lordship nor laid-backship. So if you subscribe to any of those two, it's time to do a makeover. To make matters worse, it's not just challenging to exercise a leadership that is compatible with synodality. We also live in difficult times. I'm sure we've all heard of VUCA, but there are many other acronyms that mean the same thing. You have BANI, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible, rock, rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, terrible, and tuna, turbulent, uncertain, novel, ambiguous. They all mean the same thing. It's difficult to be a leader today. According to Chan, who's a leadership guru, to lead is to lead. It's difficult to lead, especially today. According to him, your ability to lead is equal to your tolerance for pain. So if you have low tolerance for pain, you won't be very good as a leader, because leadership is painful. How many of you agree that leadership is painful? Okay, I think we have a near unanimous vote for that. And we always have, leaders today have to deal with stress and superficiality. It's the worst combination ever. Now, Nassim Nicholas Taleb came up with this interesting book called Anti-Fragile, and the subtitle is Things That Gain from Disorder. So anti-fragile for him means things that grow stronger because of stress. I really like this term, because for me this term is what we need to aim for as leaders today in the church. We all know what fragile means. It's like a plate breaking when it hits the floor, it breaks. We don't want leaders who are fragile, because there's a lot of stress. We want leaders to be resilient. We want leaders to be like the pillow. When you punch a pillow, it recovers, it gets back in shape. We want leaders like that. But even resilience is no longer enough today. We need leaders who are anti-fragile. Leaders who become stronger because of stress. And this is what the metaphor here, the symbol here, is a muscle. You have to exercise the muscle. You have to stress out the muscle to get stronger. I'm not saying that as a leader you have to go out of your way to stress yourself out. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that when the opportunity arises, we treat it exactly as an opportunity to grow stronger. So it's difficult to be a leader today. It's very difficult to be a leader today. So what we need today are anti-fragile leaders. So ask yourself, do you try to be anti-fragile? Or do you spend half the time complaining about the stress? Because we could, save up on energy and time not complaining about the stress. Because if you're a leader, do not be surprised that you'll be stressed out. Because the moment you're in charge of one person, life becomes complicated. People always complicate things. That's true, right? Don't you agree? People complicate things. So it's easier to handle pets and animals and numbers. Okay. The late Adolfo Nicolas, the Spirit General disciple Jesus, coined a term called the globalization of superficiality. And in his talk back in 2010, this particular quotation is worth repeating. So let me read it to you. This applies today more than ever in the age of AI. When one can access so much information so quickly and so painlessly, when one can express and publish to the world one's reaction so immediately and so unthinkingly in one's blogs or microblogs, when the latest opinion column from the New York Times or El País or the newest viral video can be spread so quickly to people half a world away, then the laborious, painstaking work of serious critical thinking often gets short-circuited. One can cut and paste without the need to think critically or write accurately or come to one's own careful conclusions. No more critical thinking, age of superficiality. So how do we lead during these superficial times? I'd like to propose to you that one approach to Ignatian spirituality can give us a few pointers. There are many brands of leadership. I am most familiar with Ignatian leadership, so that is why I'm sharing that with you. But I'm sure there are many others. We call this framework or approach leading with God. It's only one interpretation, it's only one approach to Ignatian leadership. There are so many approaches. And basically the main idea here is for a leader to be successful in this age of stress and superficiality, we must learn to cultivate 4 important core relationships. 4. And also corresponding to each of those core relationships is one core leadership task. So it's easy to remember, right? There are 4 relationships and 4 leadership tasks. Let me walk you through that, okay? So the most obvious relationship in leadership is between the leadership and the community. So the rapport between the leader and the community is so important. If there's no rapport, it's going to be very difficult, right? There's a saying that leaders bring the weather. What does that mean? That means that if your boss is in a bad mood, the whole office will be scared to death. If your boss is in a very good mood, everyone's happy. It's sunny weather. But sometimes there's a thunderstorm because, for example, the LSC president, if Father Eric is not in a good mood, everyone's shivering in their boots, right? Confession, I know for a fact that many people who come to see me in our School of Education always check with my assistant, how's Father feeling today? Because they don't want to be affected. But you know, the community is a very important relationship, but it's only one. The other relationship, and for St. Ignatius, the most important relationship, is a relationship of the leader with a mission. After all, our community exists. And our community is defined based on the mission of the community, right? So our mission statement is more important than we think. So the leader has to have a relationship with the mission. The other relationship is between the leader and the self. This is very Ignatian. For us to be discerning, we have to be self-aware. It's important for the leader to nurture a relationship with himself or herself. That's 3 relationships. The 4th relationship is a weird relationship, because in that relationship, the leader is not directly involved. It's a relationship between the community and the mission. That's the most important relationship. Now, I'll explain why later on. Okay? So 4 relationships: leader and community, leader and mission, leader and self, community and mission. Okay? Now, let's go through each one of them. So the first kind of depth that an Ignatian leader or a synodal leader should nurture is a deep connection to the community. For this reason, we've called this dimension of leading with depth listening leadership. Listening leadership is about the relationship of the leader with the community. And the main task of the leader here is to build the culture of the community and to build the capacity of the community. In short, the leader should take care of the community, the members of the community. So what kind of culture and what kind of capacity? Certainly a culture of empathy. We want fluid conversations to happen in the community. We want people to have the courage to speak to power. They're not just hiding things from the boss because they're afraid of the boss. They should be willing to speak up. When you think about it, this is the heart of synodality. Bishops are supposed to listen to the faithful, the lay faithful, but the lay faithful should feel empowered, should feel that they're given permission to speak up. So in every diocese, in every school or parish, there must be a culture of empathy. Now, that's not easy to do, but that's the aim. Secondly, the leader should try to build the capacity of the community for the mission. Depending on what the mission is, the leader should make sure the members are being developed properly. So obviously, if it's a school, the development will be towards, like learning how to teach more effectively, learning to design assessments, and so on and so forth. However, capacity building must not remain professional only. It should also be personal. We want, the spiritual formation, the character formation, the faith formation. That's the first dimension corresponding to the first relationship. The second one is the leader's relationship with the self, and we call this the reflective leader. There's a lot of talk today about, self-care. There's a greater awareness today about self-care. So the main job of the leader here is to nourish the self and spirit of the leader. As a leader, I must make sure I carve out time and effort to take care of myself and my spirit. Because otherwise, I'm going to burn out. So it's a way to prevent burnout. At the same time, it's important also to grow in self-awareness. Because if I'm not self-aware, what happens? My followers are going to suffer if I'm not self-aware. Because I won't know my effect on them. So praying the examen, which we have been doing regularly during this conference, is an excellent way to grow in the dimension of reflective leadership. Because in the examen, we open ourselves to the promptings of the Spirit, we review the day and find out how God has acted with us and how we've responded or not responded. And we can also improve as a result of the examen. But basically, reflective leadership is about the leader understanding the self, but also accepting the self. Because understanding the self includes not only your lights, but also your shadows, the things you can't stand about yourself. The things that are despicable about ourselves, we have to understand, but we also have to accept. And only then can we manage ourselves. So we have to, self-awareness leads to self-transcendence. And this is very important for leaders. Many people suffer because their leaders are unaware of their compulsions. The third one is the leader's relationship with a mission, and we call this the dimension of discerning leadership. And the job of the leader here is very important, to interpret the meaning and the means of the mission. Our mission statements are beautiful, they're usually posted on the wall, but usually that's all there is to it. But the point here is that our mission needs constant interpretation. We have to keep interpreting what the mission means today, and what means we must undertake to serve the mission. What are the strategic directions and priorities to pursue the mission? So how do we reinterpret the mission given the changing times? And especially today, my dear brothers and sisters, given the rapidly changing times, we need to reinterpret what our mission means today. But it's not enough. We also need to say, how can we best serve it? What are the strategies we need in order to fulfill the mission as we interpret it today? That's the third. The fourth one is connection between the community and the mission. We call this the dimension of the missioning leader. And the job of the leader, because the leader is not involved directly, is to inspire the community's sense of purpose so that they will find their sense of purpose in the mission of the community and that they will develop a passion for the mission. Okay? It's important for our community members to be inspired that they will make a commitment to the mission freely independent of their commitment to the leader. Many times, our communities are super committed to the mission because of the leader. Either the leader is absolutely charismatic, is able to inspire them. So when the leader is replaced, what happens? The commitment lapses. Or secondly, sometimes they're so committed to the mission out of fear of their leader, because their leader is a terror, they better do their work, right? But when the leader's not around, that's when they, sort of lapse and not do their work. Okay? So the job of the leader here is, how do I, even if I cannot directly cause this, how can I indirectly cause our community to give their consent? Because they have to give their consent before they commit to the mission. We can't force the members of our community to make a commitment to the mission. Okay? So those are the 4 dimensions. I know it's a lot, so we will give you time to think about it. So this is a snapshot of the leading with that framework: 4 relationships, 4 dimensions, and 4 qualities. Now, you're not going to understand this unless I give you a task to work on. And that's what we're going to do. So, of these 4 dimensions, which do you think is the biggest need in your team or organization today? Choose only one. So the 4 are there. Talk to your seatmates. And given the context of your team or organization, your need, your greatest need might be a listening leader, might be an effective leader, a discerning leader, or a mission leader. This is not a time to bash your leaders. At least not officially. You can do it at the side. I don't care. I won't police you. But the idea here is, what is the context of your team or organization? Which of the 4 do you think is the greatest need and why? Okay? A few minutes. Okay, thank you. So I hope you chose one, and I hope you articulated your reason why you chose one. I just want to ask you if you have questions about the framework. Because sometimes in the course of discussing new ideas, that's when we realize some things are not clear. So are there questions you'd like to ask this point very quickly before we move on? So is the framework more or less clear? So I'd like to propose to you that this particular framework is actually quite flexible, but it's also the thing I love about it, aside from the fact that I want to know, is that it's easy to remember. There are only four, easy to remember. So we have a book, it's called Leading with Depth, a Practitioner's Guide to 21st Century Ignatian Leadership. At the risk of shamelessly self-promoting, I'd like to ask you to buy the book at the Manila University Press. It's 600 pesos. Anyway, so what I'd like to do this morning is focus only on one of the dimensions, which I think is very interesting given our times. And this is the third dimension of discerning leadership, where we are being asked to interpret the meaning and means of the mission. The church is undergoing a lot of changes, not only because of Pope Francis' call to synodality, which should transform the church if we're able to pursue it, but also the world, the way the world is unraveling. So I think it's important for us to spend some time just to take a step back and just to reflect on what's going on in the world and what are some of the things that are happening. So one overarching question I'd like to ask is, how do we reinterpret the mission of the church, or in particular the mission of your organization, given the changing times? And what are some of the ways that we can best begin to serve the mission? Okay? After all, that is the function of the discerning leader, to interpret the meaning of the mission today and to identify certain means to the mission, certain strategic directions and priorities. What I'd like to do is draw from the research of the newest research institute in our School of Education called LIFE. It's the Research Institute for the Futures of Education, and that's the motto, for forging learning futures and frontiers. It's about futures thinking. And basically, one of the big insights that uncovered is that we are living in an era of great disruption to all our systems, including and especially religion and education. So according to these are the global mega trends: climate change, technological disruption, fracturing world, demographic shifts, social instability. So these are going to really make a lot of impact on our schools and churches. So what I want to do is sort of do a short, very quick survey. Speaking of the future, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. The first question is, in the next 10 years, do you see the world as getting better or worse? And why? And letter B, in your opinion, how capable are we of affecting the future and why? So talk to one another. actually time for Q&A on the so I don't wanna go over time too much. So remember, if you think the future will be better, you must give yourself 3 or 4. If you think you are capable of affecting the future, give yourself 3 or 4. If you think the future will be worse, give yourself 1 or 2. And if you think you can't affect the future, or you can do so only in a limited way, give yourself a score of 1 or 2. So you must have 2 scores, 1 for A and 1 for B. So please decide now. Okay, we have a score for A and a score for B. No 2.5 other area. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, we have so what I want you to do now is I want you to locate yourself in this product. You have to think. Remember, we have to experience cognitive struggle, right? So either you have high hopes or low hopes, that's A, or you have low agency or high agency. Okay. So how many people have low hopes and low agency? So you have a score of 1 or 2 for A, or 1 or 2 for B. Raise your hand. There's no shame in being honest. Okay? So we have a few. Okay. How many people have high hopes, 3 or 4, but low agency, 1 or 2? Raise your hand. Okay, a little bit more. A little bit more. Okay. How many people have high hopes? 3 or 4 for A and 3 or 4 for B, high agency. A lot of people. Okay. And finally, you have low hopes and high agency. How many people? Okay, so we have more people for the right. There's actually a term or an adjective for each one of them, so let's find out what we will call you after this. Okay? we won't engage in later on. So for those who found themselves low in hopes and also low in agency, you're feeling powerless. And I don't blame you because life can be very overwhelming and all the trends can be very overwhelming. For those of you who have high hopes and low agency, you're feeling passive. You have high hopes but you don't feel you need to do anything. There's a tendency to feel passive. What about those who have high hopes and high agency? Well, a lot of you, you're feeling powerful. In short, feeling elevated. The last one was fun. The last one, low hopes and high agency, you're feeling realistic. Who are the realistic ones here? Okay, let's congratulate them to make them happy. It's just to get us thinking about our disposition towards the future. Because we need to pray for twin graces. We need to pray for twin graces. The first is a sense of urgency, and the second is a sense of agency. Urgency, there's no time. We need to do something. Sense of agency, we can do something with God's help. That's the idea. Okay? So, what might the future of religion look like, for example? So, this is an invitation to scanning the signals of change. We're very little time, so I won't really delve into it too much. So, I've been reading this book by Charles Taylor called The Secular Age. And basically, his big idea is so interesting. He says that belief in God in previous times used to be the unchallenged norm and default. If you met a stranger on the street, most likely that's a believer. Today, because of the secular age, it's just one of many options. And if you believe in God in certain societies in the West, it's a contested option. I'm not talking about religious societies like Islamic societies and in Hindu societies, but in general, the more secularized societies, it's just one option. of many options, and it's contested. And according to Charles Taylor, this is because of what he calls disenchantment. Basically, we've lost a sense of the mystery or a sense of the sacred. So I want you to ask yourself, are you disenchanted? Are you feeling disenchanted? It means a certain disconnection between the world and the sacred due to a primarily or exclusively rational, scientific, and secularized understanding of the world. I'm not talking about your espoused belief, what you pay lip service to. Because we're all Catholics here, right? So we believe that God, we can find God in all things. I'm talking about your default disposition, when you're not reflecting, when you're just going about your day. You tend to act like a disenchanted person as though God is not just around the corner. Because to be enchanted means that we believe that the holy is lurking in the world in the most unexpected places. According to Timothy Radcliffe, back in 2019, there's a growing alienation among young people from institutional religion. He's talking about Americans or people from the West. So I want you to ask yourself, does this apply to you? For millions of young people, the language of faith simply means nothing to them. It is as outmoded as the typewriter. It belongs to another world and speaks another language. Do you see this among the people that you're ministering to? Can you not? Or shake your heads, I can tell. Okay. And also the rise of the so-called nuns, so not the sisters here, but N-O-N-E, no religious affiliation. Those who don't identify with any religion, including atheists. But also the rise of the SBNRs. You know what SBNR is, right? Spiritual, but not religious. The many Catholics who are SBNR. They're closeted SBNR. They're Catholic, but they're actually those who don't regard organized religion as necessary for spiritual growth, including those affiliated, like nominal Catholics, but they do not practice. What's in fashion today is to believe without belonging. The pilgrim seeker, self-guided spiritual practitioners, they don't have a strong religious identity, they don't have definite beliefs in theological propositions, they don't have regular standard religious practices. So what they do is they assemble a so-called spiritual bricolage. They're engaged in assembling their own private and personal spirituality. It's like Coke-like. They basically choose whatever they want. Okay. So this seems to be the trend in the West, but actually, it's not as simple as that. In a more recent study, the rise of nuns in the U.S. started in the 1990s and jumped by about 40% from 2008 to 2013. However, in 2020, the share of nuns stagnated due to Gen Zs losing their religion at slower rates than older generations, especially among younger men. So the Gen Zs, the Zoomers, are not joining the bandwagon as fast as the older generations. Do you see this among the young people? And there are three theories here. It's a response to the loneliness pandemic. More people are lonely, more people have mental health issues, so they're turning to spirituality and religion. They're reacting to the establishment, and somehow secularized atheism is the establishment. So they're reacting to that. And third, and this is the most disturbing, there seems to be a political and social shift to the right, to the conservative right. Again, it's US. So I want you to ask yourself if this is true in your country. In the Philippines, on the surface today, everything seems business as usual. Philippines still overwhelmingly Catholic, according to this article from Philippine Star. And then 7 out of 10 Filipino Catholics pray at least once daily. 38% attend religious services once a week or more than once a week. 93% personally go to a place of worship in the past 3 months. So it looks like things are okay. But according to a study by J.L. Cornelius at Ateneo faculty, young Filipino Catholics indeed are not losing their faith, but they are embracing their faith in a way that concerns them more. They're doing it in a different way. In a different way. So let's see some examples. Let me turn on the volume a bit. Some examples of what's going on social media. So here's a TikTok guy, and try to identify what's going on here.
Hey everyone, I was checking in because I was feeling that this summer we're going to have a trap cat summer. You know what I mean?
So there's a movement in the US, hashtag, not ICIS 75, but hashtag TradCath, traditional Catholics. And they want to bring back the veils, they want Latin masses. So there's that movement, don't go into the right. What about this? No? Are you ready for church GPT? No? In a church in Europe, they actually use ChatGPT for this. Let's watch it, it's interesting.
ICIS existed for 2 months, and there was a big interest, so many people came to talk with him. So we have like 900 conversations now registered, and all ages also, I can say. There were young people, older people, and what was really interesting to see that the people really talk with him in a serious way.
Hello Jesus, do you have some advice for us in this time?
In these challenging times, remember that in the face of adversity, love and faith are your steadfast guides.
The response that the AI Jesus forms is actually partly based on Bible excerpts.
All knowledge and wisdom ultimately come from God. If used wisely, AI can indeed be a tool to explore the wonders of creation, deepen our understanding of Scripture, and foster connections among people.
Okay, I'm not proposing we do this. All I'm saying is that this is happening already, and they're getting the engagement that we are not getting. So what do we do, right? So let's think about the mission and the means to the mission. What about this? Have you heard of the Roblox Filipino Catholic community? It's a very vibrant community online. It's a virtual community. And what they've done is they've recreated online in 3D some of the religious sites in the Philippines at Quiapo Church, the Cebu Cathedral, the Santo Niño Cathedral. It is a thriving hub of spiritual and social engagement with a membership that spans from 13 to 23 years of age, very young. The group has established a robust hierarchy, mirroring the structure of the Catholic Church and bishops and priests. From bishops and priests to deacons and monks, these role-playing clergy lead virtual masses, deliver homilies, and guide the community in its spiritual journey. It's more inclusive and welcoming compared to actual churches. One of the standout features of the Roblox Filipino Catholic community is its inclusive and welcoming nature, especially towards the LGBTQ+. Let's watch what they did when we had the Feast of the Santo Niño. Oops.
Sigaw namin, Viva Pit Senyor!
So again, I'm not proposing we do that, but a lot of people are going to the metaverse and doing their worship there, and they're getting a lot of engagement. If you notice the congregation, there were different colored hair and all that, so people could express themselves freely, and they felt welcome. So the question is, what can be done? What can be done? We are absent in these spaces, but it's getting a lot of engagement. Is this an opportunity? Are these apostolic opportunities? What questions are raised as a result of these phenomena? Can you talk to your seatmate for a couple of minutes? Okay, so in a way, when you think about it, I'm wrapping up now because we don't have time. In a way, when you think about it, the beverage metaphors I use for leadership style can also represent two types of Catholics, right? The Kool-Aid, those who would drink the Kool-Aid because the bishop said so or because the Bible said so, this would be the believers with a fundamentalist tendency. And again, there's no shame there. There is a certain value there. And then those who go for Coke Light, these are the people who tend to have a relativist tendency. They just want to pick and choose. No? So in a way, those who subscribe to the Kool-Aid type of Catholicism, they're evangelized through some kind of indoctrination because they did not really think about it. No? And those who subscribe to the Coke Light are evangelized by their choice. They go shopping, they decide what they want to subscribe to. So basically, we can distinguish between the closed Catholics, the Católicos cerrados, no? Obedient believers, against the cafeteria Catholics. No? Or they're selective, they want to go shopping. No? They want to pick which doctrine, which moral teachings they're going to subscribe to. Maybe one of the directions that we're being asked to consider is to think about forming or reaching out to two other types of possible believers. No? The first one would be the so-called spiritual seekers. Even if they don't like the institutional church, but they're looking, there's a thirst. I think many of you have had this experience among young people. They're looking for something. They're looking for meaning. And we've seen evidence of this in the plateauing of the nuns, of the NONPs in the US. People are looking for something to fill the emptiness that they're experiencing. These are the spiritual, but not religious. So instead of preaching to the choir, should we make a greater effort to reach out to people who are not always there during Sunday Masses and try to see, should we try to create a presence in the Roblox community, and try to influence what's being said there? The other one would be, I think, to try to form thinking Catholics. Because thinking believers are what a synodal church requires. A synodal church needs thinking believers. So how do we promote believers who are critical thinkers? How do we promote people who give their assent to the doctrine, to the teachings of the church, not blindly, but because of reason? I think this is a big challenge for those of us who are engaged in catechesis and religious education. And a lot more conversations need to be done in this area. So, as to wrap up my talk, I just want to say maybe we have to have a little switch in our approach. So I don't think the GPS approach works. What's the GPS approach? Where you give detailed information about where people should go and you give them detailed instructions, right? Nothing is more irritating than a waste who wants to correct you, right? Recalibrating, turn left, turn left, turn left now, right? So maybe that's the same effect we have with young people. If we're giving them too much information and too much instruction, they want to find their way. Process is important not only in education but also in evangelization. We want them to get to the product of our faith, to the products of our faith. But the process is also precious. So maybe an explorer's map approach is better, where there are landmarks which serve as guide, but there are also blank spaces for them to fill in as they explore and discover on their own. What is tragic is that we have people who are looking for meaning, looking for something more in their lives, but we are not around to give them some kind of guidance, or we're not effective because we're insisting on detailed instructions and detailed information. I think what's wonderful is that the universal apostolic preferences that the Society of Jesus discerned about are very much aligned to this. No? Two in particular, the wordings have always struck me. The first says, showing the way to God through the spiritual exercise and discernment. In short, you're not teaching them about God, you're just showing the way. They have to find their way to God on their own. Not GPS, but Explorer's Map. And the Explorer's Map is the spiritual exercises and discernment. And the other one, journeying with the youth, accompanying young people in the creation of a hope-filled future. Accompanying them, not leading them, but just walking with them. So I think the UAPs are of the same spirit, something that we need to think about as we try to think about Catholic leadership and the many challenges facing Catholic leaders. I'd like to end with this quote from the Synod on Synodality, October 2024. Young people are acutely aware of the values of fellowship and sharing, while rejecting paternalism or authoritarian attitudes. It is fundamental that we assure them thoughtful and patient accompaniment, in particular the proposal of an experience of accompaniment in view of discernment. It foresees companionship shared with educators, an apostolic commitment lived at the service of the neediest, and the offer of a spirituality rooted in prayer and the sacramental life. So, thoughts and questions. What do you think about the following ideas? Reaching out to the spiritual but not religious, deliberately forming thinking Catholics for a synodal church, and learning the approach of the Explorer's Map instead of GPS. I'm sorry that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for your patience and your attention.